At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Cartoons have a long and illustrious history in American politics. With few words, cartoons have the power to capture the essence of an era or a personality of significance. Jack Ohman is the new editorial cartoonist for the Sacramento Bee. He previously worked for the Oregonian, the Detroit Free Press, and the Columbus Dispatch. Jack is the winner of the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2012. In his spare time, he writes and illustrates books. Jack Ohman joins us today on Studio Sacramento to share with us his insights about the world of an editorial cartoonist. Welcome, Jack, to Studio Sacramento.
Great to be here.
So what is the essence of an editorial cartoonist?
Well, there are a lot of editorial cartoonists. I think in my case, I think I'm a commentator, and I think that kind of the dirty little secret of editorial cartooning is that it's a writing job and not a drawing job. And I think that, you know, the readers will look at a political cartoon and they'll say, wow, you drew his ears really big, or wow, you drew his nose really big, or whatever. And you know, what I'm really doing is distilling a phrase, and I'm going through the papers every day and I'm trying to get down to 2 or 3 words, something that I can convey very quickly. So I had a friend who once described editorial cartoons as columns in haiku form. So I think, you know, that's...
Columns in haiku form.
Mm-hmm. I didn't do that in 575, but...
That's a very interesting, that's an interesting concept. So in fact, editorial cartoonists are journalists?
Well, actually, I wrote a column about this on my blog on the Bee the other day, and there's a great story about Rube Goldberg, who did the, you know, Rube Goldberg machines, right? And he once said to his editor, "Is a cartoonist a journalist?" And the editor said, "Is a barnacle a ship?" So, you know, it's hard to say. I mean, I think I'm a journalist.
Mm-hmm. How did you end up on this career path? It seems like a very unusual occupation to end up in.
Well, considering there's only about 50 editorial cartoonists left in the United States, I had a much better shot at becoming a U.S. Senator. There were 100 job openings. I worked in politics. I lived in Minnesota for a long time, and when I first moved there, Humphrey was the junior senator and Mondale was the senior senator, and they had both been vice president. And so I got interested in politics, and I became kind of a junior political aide and advance man. And by 1978, I was an advance man for a congressional campaign. And I needed a way to put myself through college, and so there was an opening for the political cartoonist on the Minnesota Daily at the University of Minnesota, and so I applied for that, and that's how I got started in it.
You talk about the writing. Mm-hmm. How important is it to be a good artist in order to be a good editorial cartoonist?
It's not that important.
Really?
Really. I think a lot of editorials, they couldn't cut it in advertising art. Mm-hmm. You know, I think what's important is that you be a good designer. You know, that you can, I mean, it's important to be a good artist. I consider myself a good artist. I mean, I pride myself on my drawing style. And it took a long way to get there, but I mean, if you put me down on the river and said, you know, paint like Gregory Kondos or something, it would be like, I don't know, you know.
Too much pressure?
It's too much pressure. It's so big, it takes so much time. But I think art is important. You know, if you look at the cartoons of Tom Towles, for example, they're very simple. You know, Jules Pfeiffer, very simple. And, you know, my predecessor, Rex Babin, was an excellent artist. I mean, he was a great, fine artist, loved to paint, loved to do things like that. So I consider myself more in the, you know, in the arts side of editorial cartooning.
Describe your process on how you get to what it is that we see in the paper.
Well, I sit quietly and sweat for about 6.5 hours. The process is...
Incidentally, just give us a frame. How many of these do you have to produce a week?
Well, I'm running about 5 to 6, at least
Okay.
5 and sometimes 6.
All right.
And, yeah. And then I'm doing 5 columns a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead now.
I've kind of lost track of what you asked me.
What?
Sorry.
It's okay. Your process.
Oh, my
on
process.
How you get started.
Sure. I'm constantly reading. I'm on the internet. I'm reading the Times. I'm reading the Bee. I'm reading everything I can get my hands on. And as I said, I'm trying to get to a phrase. The hardest part for me is not coming up with the actual joke or the idea or the concept. The hardest part for me is deciding, what it is that I want to say and what the subject is. And so, you pick up the Sacramento Bee and you go to the Capitol page and there's like 6 great stories, about whatever is happening, and, Brown's doing this and Perez is doing that and Steinberg's doing this, and, it's like, what do you choose? It's not, it's hard to get there. And then once I've decided what I want to do, then I have to figure out what I want to say. And so I always have said, and this is kind of a dirty little secret in editorial cartooning, they always say that there are 12 basic novel plots. I think there might be 12 basic political cartoon approaches, and people say, how do you get there? And I say, well, you can do a comparison contrast, you can do a single panel, you can do 4 panels, you can do, set up punchline. There's a lot of different ways to get there. I mean, it's a mechanical process that I think cartoonists understand and readers don't.
So, any interaction with your colleagues on the editorial board, other reporters, anything like that, or are you just sort of like a monk off by yourself?
I've actually used the phrase monk. I mean, I'm an editorial monk. I sit and do illuminations all day by myself. No, I go into the morning editorial board meeting, and having come down from Oregon, I was up there for 29 years, my entire adult life. I started there when I was 23 years old, and I'm 52 now. And coming from Oregon, which is a not as complicated state, shall we say, as California.
Not a chance.
Well, I always say Oregon is California's northernmost county. I mean, that's kind of the way I felt when I came down here. I mean, I had a national profile and I was doing national stuff, but I was also, to have the opportunity to come down and do this incredibly complicated state is, it's like having to learn calculus in Latin. It's difficult, and so,
especially with all the material that generates itself just organically from the state capitol.
Well, the good thing for me was having Governor Brown in office, and so I mean I had followed him my entire life. I can remember when I first got interested in politics in 1976 or so, and he was running for president, and I tracked him very closely, and to have him at this confluence at my career was very useful. And so also having the King's catastrophe unfold at the same time was also something that was good for me, as a running start.
Well, if you're looking at cartoons as a form of satire, who in the whole King's drama do you consider the easiest to lampoon?
Well, I think that Sacramento is lucky that they accidentally elected an NBA guy as mayor because he is the precisely right person to make this happen. So I want to see the Kings stay. I think he's doing a great job on the Kings. He's a very compelling figure. Obviously the Maloofs are, I don't want to get too pejorative here, but they're not popular, and they're not popular in the league. And I think that, ultimately this was, they're the bad guys in this. And
we invited them on. They still haven't shown up
what a
yet.
surprise.
Yeah. But so if you hear from them, please let us know.
Sure, they don't call me.
Okay. When have you ever done a cartoon where you said, man, I really screwed that one up?
No, never have. No, well,
you've been well media trained.
Yeah, no, I got $40,000 of teeth to go with it too. Yeah, I have certainly looked at cartoons that I've done and regretted it. I mean, I don't think that that's a possible not to have that emotion when I've done probably 10,000, 9,000 cartoons in my career.
Name one where you really missed the mark. What were you trying to accomplish, and how did you miss it?
Well, that's hard to say. I think what you don't want to do is accidentally offend people, and so there have been moments when I've accidentally offended
So you
people.
intentionally offend.
Right. But, well, I mean, that's part of the job description.
Okay.
But the thing about it is that when you unintentionally offend, that's your fault. And so I can give you an illustration of this. In Oregon, about 15 years ago, they had a music ordinance where they couldn't have street musicians within X number of feet from the front doors of businesses. And so I drew this cartoon called the Street Musician Distance Guide, and so 25 feet was the violinist, and 75 feet was the bass guitarist, and then I had on the top Mount Hood an accordionist. Well, I didn't know how many accordionists there were in the United States until I drew that cartoon, and that I got letters from the Anti-Defamation League from the Italians, and the Anti-Defamation League from Polish people, and so it's like, who knew that just doing an accordion joke would lead to World War III?
Unintended consequences.
Right.
What about your favorite? One where you said, I really nailed this one.
The one I finished yesterday. I mean, every time you get done, it's a small miracle in this business. And, I have a hard time really thinking about precisely, what the one cartoon would be that I liked the most. I think the one I probably remember the most is when the Challenger exploded, and I did a cartoon on that, and it ran in Newsweek, and we raised tens of thousands of dollars for the families of the astronauts, and I got a letter from one of the astronauts' sisters, and I mean, that was incredibly poignant.
In terms of a barometer of success, do you ever feel like, is the measure of success like, if a person's really pissed off, if it's a personal caricature, then yeah, I achieved the target. What's the barometer of success in your business?
Well, that I pick up a check on Friday afternoon.
Well,
but
that's
no, the
fundamental.
second one is that, no, I think, I want to have an impact, and however that plays out. It's hard to influence policy with an editorial cartoon, but actually, when I was in Oregon, Phil Knight, who was running Nike, they had a daycare center at the Nike World Headquarters called the Joe Paterno Child Development Center, and so I kind of led an effort to get the name changed on that, and so that was probably one, and they did it, and I was the only person practically who was doing anything about it, and so that goes back to my role as cartoonist, as journalist and provocateur, and so I think it's an important role. Since I've been down here, I've had some interactions with electeds that have been intriguing to me. I got a call from Speaker Perez's office a couple months ago, and they send you an email and they say, he'd like to meet with you for 5 minutes, and I'm always thinking, well, if somebody wants to meet with you for 5 minutes, it's usually your ex-wife or your accountant. They want to have a little talk, right?
That's right.
So I went in, and I think he just wanted me to see him physically, so that I wasn't under the impression that he weighed 700 pounds, and then it was very cordial, and he said, what I really didn't like about this cartoon? I said, no, I can imagine, and he said, I never wear green ties, and I think he was wearing a red tie, so no more green ties.
No more green ties. You won the Robert F. Kennedy Award. Tell us about that. What was that for?
I've won a number. I've won virtually every major award, and been a finalist for the Pulitzer. But the one that really was amazing to me was the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award. And when you win that award, you get a call, and it's from Ethel Kennedy.
Wow.
And you pick up the phone. Hello, this is Ethel Kennedy, and I just want to tell you that you won the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, and that you honor Bobby's memory. And, to a baby boomer, I mean, the incredible resonance of this is overwhelming. But the last time I had seen Ethel Kennedy was on June 8th, 1968, when I was a 7-year-old child at Arlington Cemetery watching the burial of Robert F. Kennedy.
Wow, what an arc of history.
Yeah.
Man. So when you saw her, I assume she was at the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Did you speak to her at all?
I did. Yeah, she's very, very petite, and she's very cordial, and she's about 85 years old now. So she had a friend in Oregon. That's what we talked about. How's Wally?
How's Wally?
So he's fine.
Well, over the years, who's been or what's been your favorite subject? One that you return to time and time again?
Over the years?
Yeah.
Well, there's a cyclical nature to editorial cartoon topics, and I've been drawing Governor Brown since I was 14 years old. No kidding. I mean, I have drawings from 1975 or whatever.
Are you better?
Much. Faster and better compensated. But there are subjects that keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and I've got a strong interest in the environment. My father used to be deputy chief of the U.S. Forest Service, and so living in Oregon, I focused on that. And I'm very interested in, campaign finance reform. I've done a lot of work on that. And so, those are kind of the two areas that I've focused on more, I think.
And just, moving to your blog and your writings, what are the issues right now that are of most interest to you that you're following the most closely?
Well, my blog is very idiosyncratic, and it's not, I'm doing a lot of personal journalism right now. And you'll notice on Sunday that I'm doing, a large Sunday color piece, and I have been doing this for about 4 or 5 years, and I actually will go out in the community and report things, and it's kind of like a little graphic novel in a way, or graphic journalism. So that's one thing I've been very interested in. And my blog, I will talk about my process in cartooning a lot. I'll talk about California politics a lot, which I'm learning very quickly. There are 40 senators and 80 state assembly people. So it's hard to, I'm getting up to speed on it.
But as you come down from Oregon, the issues
like OR7. I'm like the wandering wolf.
The issues of most importance that, when you look at sort of, as you describe, Oregon being California's northernmost county, you come here and you see the complexity here. Do you ever say to yourself, there are 2 or 3 things, why can't these folks just get it together on these 2 issues?
Well, I think there's a Venn diagram between Oregon and Washington, and the overlap is environmental issues. And southern Oregon is northern California, and so I haven't had any issues there. They also have a public employee retirement system crisis up there that they've actually been working on, I think, longer than they have here, and I think they have it more under control than they do have here. Obviously this is, something that is catastrophic here. And so, the complexity of California is not just on a state level, but you have to think about California as fiefdoms almost. It's like, there's the San Francisco fiefdom, and there's the Southern California fiefdom, and there's a Central Valley fiefdom, and there's a NorCal fiefdom, and they all have very different agendas. And so Oregon basically was Portland, the Valley, and the rest of the state, which was very cowboy, cattle ranch country, and how you reconcile that, it's hard for me to see.
Well, it's interesting because your career has taken you to these different places. You were back in the industrial Rust Belt in Columbus, and then you went to Detroit, where I come from, and
my father was from,
and then you go to Oregon and finally to California. Let's go back east. What is it that you learned back there that you sort of compare and contrast to where you're at today?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think I've almost become uniquely prepared to do this, because actually before I was in Minnesota, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 3 years, from 68 to 71, when, you know, the hinges were coming off.
Right.
But, you know, I was aware enough as a child to know what was going on, and that led into Watergate. And so when I got to Minnesota, which is, you know, not a Rust Belt state by any, it's a dairy state, and,
Right.
you know, I was very attuned to politics because of Humphrey and Mondale. And then when I started my career in Columbus and Detroit, I saw what the Rust Belt was really all about. Now, I was not living a Rust Belt experience in Detroit. I was living in Grosse Pointe. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, I mean, as a young guy, I mean, I didn't really get around Detroit the way I should have gotten around Detroit. And when I went back last year, you know, I took the time to really go out in those areas where it's catastrophic. I mean, I was telling you earlier that whatever you think Detroit is, or what people think Detroit is, it's 1,000 times worse. I mean, 1/3 of Detroit is vacant.
Well, you know, go ahead.
Well, no,
Go
but
ahead.
just, so then coming out to Oregon, which was when I got on the plane in Detroit, and, you know, you're driving out the Fisher out to the airport, and, you know, there's garbage along the freeways and stuff like that, and you get off the plane in Portland, Oregon, where there are roses growing at the airport, and, you know, wood chips at the Burger King, and, you know, it was a very different environment. So, you know, coming down here, it's both. You know, it's Oregon, and there's also, you know, extreme social problems.
When you look at the, you know, the dire nature of the straits that those cities, those Rust Belt cities are in, and the struggles that they've had to meet, and then you come out west where things are a bit younger and newer, this is the place we were supposed to get it right.
Right.
Yet we've had our Vallejos and Stocktons and San Bernardinos and others. And as a journalist and as someone who obviously follows the public space on a daily basis, you know, is what you saw back there sort of the canary in the cave for if we don't get our act together, what the future might be?
Well, you know, my mother lived in Sacramento in the late 30s and early 40s, and so, I mean, I have a sense of Sacramento as well. Do I think it's a canary in the cave? It could be. You know, I don't think so, because I think that we're not as manufacturing driven as they are. We're more information driven. We're more technology driven. You know, what's happening in the Midwest is that they're deindustrializing. I mean, they're getting rid of everything. They're not just getting rid of cars. I mean, my daughter went to school in Galesburg, Illinois. They used to have Maytag in Galesburg, Illinois, and now they don't. You know, the biggest employer there is the hospital. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, I mean, that's what scares me about the Midwest, is that, you know, what are you going to do with it? I mean, if you just let it go, who's going to repopulate it? What's it going to be like? I mean, you come out here, I mean, California's always been the American dream. I feel like I've mentally lived in California my entire life because
Really?
of television.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I mean, you know, you watch Leave It to Beaver, and you watch The Brady Bunch, and you watch, you know, The Rockford Files, and you watch all these programs, and California, you know, occupies this headspace in every single sentient baby boomer. You know, or everybody now, because of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. It's pervasive, and so you know, everybody has an idea about what California is like, and so, you know, California is, you know, not just a state. It's a zeitgeist. I mean, and people aspire to it. I mean, I feel honored to be able to come to California. I mean, to me, it's a culmination.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Governor Brown needs to call you up to help with the tourism board.
Well, you need my help on that.
So one of the things that I'd be interested in knowing is, in California, you know, you are a fly fisherman, mm-hmm. and you write books on fly fishing. How's the fishing here?
It's excellent. I went to Bishop a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the best experiences I've had in fishing. It was stunning, and I backpacked over there in the last 15 years too. I've come down to California and fish.
Where does that interest in fly fishing come from?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota. There's not, you know,
yeah, that's right.
There's not that much to do there. So, You know, we milk the cows, we drink beer, we go fishing.
You pretty good at it?
Fishing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not bad. You know, my vision's going, but
You're
it's hard to tie the
little knots,
yeah,
and,
little knots,
and all
yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
In our final moments, just a curiosity, since you have lived here, what do you enjoy doing other than your fishing? In our final moments, what do you enjoy doing when you're not about to skewer one of the rich and mighty?
Well, I'll tell you something that a very pleasant discovery about the Sacramento area to me has been cycling, and it's a beautiful cycling town, and it's very comparable to Portland that way. And so I enjoy cycling and socializing with my friends and walking and just doing regular 52-year-old guy stuff like going to the hardware store.
All right. Well, we will keep watching the paper.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, that's our show. Thanks to Jack Ohman for being our guest, and thank you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.